The silence before the storm. No one believed the moon would ever become humanity's first battlefield. For 3 centuries it had been Earth's quiet neighbor, a pale stone hanging in the night sky, admired by poets and mapped by scientists. But beneath its gray, cratered surface, far from the eyes of ordinary citizens, the moon had become something else entirely. It had become a fortress. Thousands of kilometers of tunnels wound through the lunar rock, carrying power lines, water systems, and air recyclers to hidden cities that no telescope from Earth could ever see. Fusion reactors hummed quietly in deep caverns. Research labs studied the edges of physics. And buried under it all sat the beating heart of humanity's defense network, a station known simply as Meridian. Officially, Meridian existed to track asteroids and monitor solar weather. That was the story given to the public, and for 200 years, it had been enough. Unofficially, every sensor on that station pointed outward, scanning the dark for any sign that humanity was not alone in the universe. For 200 years, the answer had always been silence. Captain Mira Solano had grown used to that silence. She had spent 11 years inside Meridian's command center, watching quiet starfields and filing quiet reports. She liked the quiet. It meant nothing was trying to kill anyone. Tonight, sitting in her command chair with a cup of lukewarm coffee in her hand, she expected nothing different. Then the silence ended. A single light blinked on the holographic display in front of her. Small, red, and far at the edge of the solar system. She set down her coffee. "Lieutenant Park, run a diagnostic on sensor array 7, she said. "Running now, Captain." A pause. "Diagnostics clean. No malfunction." Mira frowned at the dot. It shouldn't be there. She had memorized every comet, every drifting piece of debris in that region. This was new. Track its movement. The room went quiet in a different way now, the kind of quiet that comes right before everyone realizes something is wrong. Park's voice cracked slightly when he spoke again. "Captain, there's not just one. There are dozens. No, hundreds." Mira stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the console behind her. On the display, more red dots bloomed across the dark like a spreading rash, each one representing something massive, something moving with a speed that defied everything human engineering could produce. "Velocity reading?" she asked, already dreading the answer. Park's hands trembled slightly over his controls. 8% of light speed, Captain. Maybe more. No human ship had ever come close to that speed. Not the fastest military cruiser, not the experimental probes Earth had sent to the outer planets. Whatever was approaching wasn't built by humanity, and it wasn't drifting by accident. It was coming with purpose. Mira didn't waste another second. She slammed her palm against the emergency comm panel. "This is Commander Solano at Lunar Station Meridian. We have confirmed multiple unidentified contacts entering the system at extreme velocity. This is not a drill. Repeat, this is not a drill." Within minutes, the message reached Earth Defense Command, and within an hour, it reached every military base, every orbital shipyard, and every colony from Mars to the icy moons of Jupiter. General Theo Marsh, a broad-shouldered man with steel-gray eyes who had spent 30 years preparing for a moment he never thought would come, stood in the war room beneath New Geneva and watched the same red dots Mira had seen. "Confirm condition status," he said, his voice flat and controlled despite the chaos building behind his eyes. "Condition black, sir," an aide answered. "Full planetary alert." Marsh closed his eyes for a single breath. 200 years of careful preparation, war games, fleet drills, and theoretical doctrine were about to be tested for real, against an enemy no one had ever seen. "Launch every fleet," he ordered. "Mars Defense Wing, Titan Reserve Squadron, Earth Orbital Command. I want every gun crewed and every shield online within the hour." Across the solar system, warning sirens rose in unison. Pilots scrambled from barracks half-dressed. Engineers powered up reactors that had never been tested under real combat conditions. Within that single hour, more warships left dock than had launched in the entire previous century combined. And yet, despite all that motion, despite every weapon humanity could muster, the question on everyone's mind was the same one whispered quietly in Meridian's command center. What do they want? The answer came 22 hours later, and it answered nothing at all. The alien fleet didn't slow as it crossed into the inner solar system. It didn't probe Earth's defenses or test Mars's orbital cannons. It moved past both worlds as though they didn't exist, ignoring every warning shot fired across its bow, ignoring every desperate hail sent on every frequency humanity possessed. It was heading for the moon. Mira watched the formation on her display with a growing knot in her stomach. They're not engaging anyone. They're not stopping. Confirm, are they bypassing Earth defense grid entirely? Confirmed, Captain, Park said, his voice tight. Every one of them is altered course toward Luna. Direct heading for our position. Dr. Felix Okafor, the station's lead Xenotech researcher, stepped up beside Myra's chair, his tablet trembling slightly in his hands. He was a small, wiry man with thinning hair and eyes that rarely blinked when he was thinking hard, and right now he was thinking very hard. They're searching for something, he said quietly. Look at the formation pattern. It's not a siege. It's not random. It's methodical, like they already know where to look. Mira looked at him sharply. Know where to look for what? There's nothing down here but defense installations and mining colonies. Felix didn't answer. He didn't have one yet, and that frightened him more than the approaching fleet. By the time the alien armada reached lunar orbit, every star visible from the moon's surface had been swallowed by an ocean of black hulls. Some ships stretched barely a kilometer long. Others, the largest Mira had ever seen, extended nearly 50 kilometers from bow to stern, their surfaces rippling like liquid obsidian, etched with glowing crimson markings that pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. The fleet numbered over 12,000 vessels. Enough firepower, by any reasonable military estimate, to turn the moon into dust within minutes. Then, every communication channel on Meridian lit up at once. A translated message blared through every speaker in the command center, the voice cold and mechanical, stripped of anything resembling mercy. This system now belongs to the Scourge Collective. Surrender the buried relic. Resistance will result in total extinction. The room went deathly silent. Mira exchanged a glance with Felix. Buried relic, she repeated slowly. What relic? No one answered. No file, no record, no historical document in humanity's possession mentioned anything buried beneath the lunar surface besides bedrock and ice. On Earth, President Adiz Bello received the same message in the war room beside General Marsh, her expression unreadable as she turned to him. Theo, do we know what they're asking for? No, ma'am, Marsh admitted. We have no idea what's down there. The aliens, it seemed, were not interested in waiting for an answer. A countdown appeared on every human screen connected to the Scourge transmission, ticking down from 30 minutes. And then, without warning, every weapon in that massive fleet turned toward a single point on the lunar surface, the ancient, crater-scarred basin near the moon's southern pole, a region humanity had mapped 1,000 times and found nothing remarkable about at all. Thousands of beams of crimson energy converged on that one location simultaneously. The lunar surface convulsed as though struck by a god's fist. Mountains older than human civilization vanished in an instant, swallowed by fire and light. Shockwaves rippled outward across the surface, shaking Meridian's foundations despite being built to withstand seismic events far beyond anything natural. Structural integrity holding, Park called out, voice shaking, but Captain, they're not stopping. They're drilling. They're going deeper. Mira stared at the display, watching the beam continue, narrowing and intensifying, boring through kilometers of solid rock with a precision that felt less like an attack and more like a search. They know exactly where something is buried, Felix whispered. And they're not going to stop until they find it. Alarms shrieked through Meridian's corridors. Seismic cascade detected. Subsurface tunnels collapsing. We're losing contact with outer settlements. Crater Colony 7 is gone, sir. Crater Colony 11, gone. Mira gripped the edge of her console so hard her knuckles went white. Thousands of lives, entire communities built over generations, erased in minutes by a weapon she didn't even understand. What are they digging for? She said through clenched teeth, more to herself than anyone else. No one answered. Then, every screen across Meridian flickered violently, and power surged through circuits that hadn't existed in any blueprint Mira had ever studied. Ancient systems, hidden beneath layers of lunar rock for longer than recorded human history, stirred to life for the first time. Deep below the burning crater, something old, something far older than either humanity or the invading fleet above it, finally opened its eyes. A massive pulse of energy erupted from beneath the surface, rippling outward like a shockwave through space itself. Every alien ship in that 12,000-strong fleet halted at once. Formations broke apart in confusion. Several massive vessels began retreating without orders, their crews clearly terrified by something they recognized and humanity did not. On an intercepted frequency, garbled and barely translated, a single phrase crackled through Meridian speakers, spoken in a tone that sounded almost like dread. No. It still lives. And then, without further warning, the moon split open. Not from the bombardment. From within. Massive structures of dark, ancient metal began rising through the broken crust, climbing toward the stars like the bones of a sleeping giant finally stretching after an impossibly long rest. Golden light spread across their surfaces in long, branching veins, illuminating one section after another as though the entire structure were waking up piece by piece. Inside Meridian's command center, every screen displayed the same message at once, written in no language anyone recognized, yet somehow understood by every human who read it. Custodian species confirmed. Dormant systems reactivating. Warden Prime online. Mira stared at the words, her heartbeat pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. Beside her, Felix had gone pale, his tablet forgotten in his hand. "Captain," he said slowly, "I don't think we know anything about what's actually buried down there." Mira swallowed hard, watching as the towering shapes continued rising from the wreckage of the moon's south pole, blotting out the stars one by one. "No," she said quietly. "But I think we're about to find out." The Guardian rises. The moon no longer looked like a moon. What had once been a familiar gray sphere hanging in Earth's sky was now something else entirely, a half-shattered shell revealing the bones of a machine older than human memory. Towering pillars of dark metal rose kilometer after kilometer into the black of space, their surfaces lit with branching veins of gold that pulsed like something breathing for the first time in eons. Entire mountain ranges along the southern pole folded inward, mechanical joints the size of cities grinding open after a sleep too long to measure in human years. Inside Meridian's command center, Captain Mira Solana watched the chaos unfold across every screen, her mind struggling to process what her eyes told her was real. The Scourge collective fleet, which moments ago had filled the sky like an unstoppable wall of death, was now scattering. 12,000 warships, the largest armada humanity had ever witnessed, broke formation in open panic. "They're retreating," Park said, disbelief thick in his voice. "Captain, half the fleet is pulling back." Mira didn't answer right away. She was watching the words still glowing on her display, the same words repeated on every terminal across the station. Custodian species confirmed. Dormant systems reactivating. Warden Prime online. "Felix," she said slowly, "I need you to tell me what custodian means. Right now." Dr. Felix Okafor shook his head, eyes wide behind his glasses. "I don't know, Captain. There's nothing in any record, human or otherwise, that uses that term. Whatever this is, it predates everything we've ever studied." Before either of them could say more, the floor of Meridian's lower observation deck trembled. A section of wall that had been solid rock for as long as the station existed began to glow faintly, then split apart with a low mechanical groan, revealing a corridor that should not have been there. Soft golden light spilled out from within, illuminating walls of smooth, dark metal etched with the same glowing symbols visible on the structures rising outside. Security teams rushed to the breach, weapons raised, but nothing emerged to threaten them. Instead, a beam of pale white light swept gently across the corridor entrance, scanning the air itself. "Genetic verification complete," a calm, ancient voice said, echoing through the station. "Human lineage confirmed. Access granted, Custodian Solano." Mira froze. "It knows my name. It knows all our names," Felix whispered, staring at the corridor with a mixture of terror and fascination. "Captain, I think we need to go in there." General Marsh's voice crackled through her earpiece moments later, sharp with urgency from his command post back on Earth. "Solano, talk to me. What in God's name is happening up there?" "General, the moon isn't just a fortress," Mira said, already moving toward the strange corridor with Felix close behind her. "It's something else. Something ancient. It just opened a door for me specifically, and I intend to find out why." "Negative, Captain, hold position until..." The transmission cut out as she crossed the threshold, the golden light swallowing her along with Felix and two of her security officers. Whatever waited beyond that door wasn't interested in waiting for permission from Earth. The corridor stretched longer than seemed physically possible, given the size of the station above it, but Mira didn't have time to question the geometry. At its end stood a circular doorway nearly 50 meters tall, its surface shimmering like liquid metal, covered in slowly rotating symbols. As she approached, the symbols stopped turning, and the same beam of light scanned her from head to toe. The massive door split open soundlessly, revealing a chamber so vast it seemed to swallow the beam of every flashlight her team carried. Rows of colossal machines stretched into darkness above, some shaped like armored giants 3 stories tall, others sleek and angular like starships frozen mid-flight, suspended in fields of shimmering energy. Thousands of smaller drones rested in crystalline alcoves along the walls, each one untouched by dust or time, waiting. In the center of the chamber floated a sphere nearly 200 meters wide, its surface rippling with slow-moving constellations, like a piece of the night sky had been folded into a ball and left to drift in place. As Mira stepped closer, the sphere pulsed once, and light spread outward across the chamber. One by one, the towering machines stirred. Some lowered into something resembling a kneel. Others raised mechanical arms in something close to a salute. "Welcome home, Custodian Solano," the same ancient voice said, now resonating directly from the sphere itself. "We have waited a very long time for your return." A figure made of shifting starlight rose from the sphere's surface, its form constantly reshaping itself like a slow-moving galaxy given shape. When it spoke again, its voice carried both immense age and something almost like warmth. "I am Warden Prime," it said. "Final guardian of the Custodian Arsenal, entrusted with this sanctuary by those who came before." Mira found her voice with effort. "Before what? Before us? Are you saying humans didn't build this?" "No," Warden Prime said simply. "You did not build this. You were chosen to protect it." Felix stepped forward despite his trembling hands, his scientific curiosity overpowering his fear. "Chosen by whom?" The chamber darkened, and a massive star map unfolded in the air above them, thousands of glowing points representing civilizations scattered across the galaxy. One by one, the lights began winking out, each extinguished by the same crimson symbol marking the Scourge fleet above. "Long before your species existed," Warden Prime said, "an alliance of ancient civilizations built this arsenal to protect the galaxy from forces seeking to dominate it absolutely. When that alliance fell, its survivors chose a young, unproven species to safeguard what remained, believing humanity's resilience and creativity made it worthy of the task. The Scourge Collective has spent 100,000 years hunting any trace of that legacy, believing every guardian species had been wiped out. The hologram turned toward Mira, its starlit eyes steady. They were wrong. Outside, the Scourge Collective fleet had recovered from its initial shock. Aboard the flagship Devourer's Wrath, Overlord Vex Thren stared at the tactical display with barely controlled fury, his elongated frame rigid with tension as crimson light reflected off his armored shoulders. The legends were supposed to be myths, an officer said carefully from beside him. Command assured us the custodians were extinct. Command was wrong, Vex Thren snarled. And now an entire species has inherited what we have hunted for 100 millennia. He turned toward his fleet commanders, his voice dropping to something cold and absolute. Then we will finish what should have ended long ago. Target the lunar structure with everything we have. Concentrate every weapon system. I want that moon turned to dust before that arsenal fully awakens. Throughout the fleet, 12,000 warships began charging weapons simultaneously, massive energy collectors unfolding from their hulls to drink in starlight and convert it into devastating firepower. Space itself seemed to shudder under the strain of so much concentrated destruction gathering in one place. Back inside Meridian's command post, General Marsh watched the buildup with a sinking feeling in his stomach. If they fire together, he said grimly to President Bello, there won't be a moon left to fight over. Inside the ancient chamber, alarms echoed faintly through the structure as Warden Prime registered the same threat. Mira turned toward the looming intelligence. They're about to destroy everything. Can this place even survive that kind of attack? They believe they can destroy us, Warden Prime said calmly. They are mistaken. The floor beneath them vibrated as ancient machinery began rising from beneath the chamber's polished surface. Towering forms unfolded like blooming flowers of gold and dark metal, ancient warships and defense platforms long dormant now stretching outward, preparing for the first time in 100,000 years to fight. Humanity's resilience was never simply about survival, Warden Prime continued, its voice resonating with quiet conviction as Mira watched ancient guns the size of city blocks rotate to face the threat above. It is about creating something greater from the wreckage of disaster, again and again, without surrender. That is why you were chosen. Now, Custodian, it is time to prove the choice was correct. The Scourge fleet fired as one. Thousands of crimson beams lanced down toward the lunar surface, converging into a single overwhelming wave of destruction meant to erase the moon and everything beneath it. For one terrible heartbeat, it seemed nothing could survive that kind of devastation. Then golden light erupted from beneath the lunar surface, forming a shield unlike anything human or Scourge technology had ever produced, absorbing the impossible barrage and scattering it harmlessly into space. The ancient defense platforms surged upward through the broken crust, weapon systems older than civilization itself opening fire in perfect, devastating coordination. Beams of pure light tore through Scourge warships with terrifying precision, vessels the size of small moons crumbling under attacks that seemed to understand their weaknesses instantly. Overlord Vex Thren watched in growing horror as a third of his fleet disintegrated within minutes, the legendary arsenal proving every terrifying story true. Fall back, he finally roared, abandoning pride for survival. All ships, retreat immediately. But Warden Prime was not finished. As the remaining Scourge vessels turned to flee, a final pulse of golden energy swept across the battlefield, disabling weapons and engines across the fleet without destroying a single additional ship. We do not seek extinction, Warden Prime's voice boomed across every frequency, reaching the fleeing Scourge fleet directly. We seek only to protect what was entrusted to us. Leave this system, and you will live to remember this lesson. The remaining Scourge ships, stripped of offensive capability, retreated into the darkness of space, carrying with them a warning that would echo through their empire for generations. Humanity was no longer alone, and it was no longer defenseless. In the weeks that followed, Earth changed forever. Mira Solano stood once again in the ancient chamber beneath the moon's surface, now humanity's greatest treasure rather than its best-kept secret. Warden Prime's light flickered gently nearby as Felix studied readouts with barely contained excitement, finally able to explore the legacy entrusted to their species. "We have a great deal to learn," Warden Prime said, watching President Bello and General Marsh arrive through the corridor to witness the arsenal themselves. "And a great responsibility now resting on your shoulders." Mira looked out at the towering machines surrounding her, remnants of a war fought before humanity ever existed, now humanity's burden and honor to carry forward. "We've never been afraid of responsibility," she said quietly. "Just ask anyone who's ever watched us turn disaster into something worth fighting for." Warden Prime's light pulsed warmly, something almost like approval in its glow. "Then humanity," it said, "welcome to your true beginning."